So I got a short and sweet talk for you, maybe 15 minutes, and then we do questions to spark somewhat of a debate. And I'll try to answer as much as I can without breaking any NDAs, because the first party platforms have very strict NDAs. So I'll do my best and maybe stay quiet. This is the do's and the don'ts. Let's get into it. First off, who am I? My name is Gustav Carlberg. I work as a technical producer at Aurora today. I started in programming though, doing ports myself, and now stayed away a bit from that and do like end-to-end porting from initial technical risk assessment to like the production and post-release updates and etc. And certification, of course. This is some of the games I've worked at recently, or been involved at, and you can see the platforms vary. I forgot to write platform on the last two as well. I worked on Distant Blue myself, doing the port, and been a producer for the rest of them. So a good variety of games. And I think most of them, 2 of them haven't been released yet. Creature Kind releases tomorrow. So go wishlist, go buy. On console, that is. It already exists on PC. That's fantastic. All right. The most exciting part. What is porting? The process of taking one game from one platform to another, from console to PC or PC to console, or anything like that. So that's it. And then why port? This is where I convince you that porting is a good idea and why you should do it and why you should listen to me today. So we all can't just release Schedule 1 on shadow drop it on Steam and hope for millions and millions of downloads. So we do it for visibility and better audience reach. It's a really good motivator. So we're going to start off by looking at some numbers. This is the porting landscape today, or the gaming landscape today. This is from last year, 2024. We had 18,861 games released on Steam. That's kinda crazy. We're also seeing an upwards trend here. We might see 20,000 games released in 2025. That would have been insane. Then we can go to Nintendo Switch. It has 2,642 games released in 2024. Still a lot, but nowhere close to Steam. And then between Xbox Series and PlayStation 5, it's just a couple of hundred games actually released in 2024. I thought it was more, but it's almost nothing. And then you might think, like, well, the gamers are at PC. You could be right, but that's not where the money is. So this is what in 2024 again, the consoles generated $51.9 billion. That's billion with a B. That's crazy amounts of money. While PC only generated $43.2 billion. And if we go back one slide and let that sink in, that's between a lot fewer games. So visibility is so much easier on console. Also, it might be just right for your audience. And now we move on to the next section. To improve the main version of the game, this is something people generally don't think about. When you do optimization, you rework your architecture to make it easier to port, you also make your main game version a lot better. So optimization work, good stuff. I will talk a bit more about that later. But you should think about optimization not just about making cuts. It's a strategic approach to resource management. When you do it right, you get smoother gameplay, lower minimum requirements for PC, which is a wider audience. Also faster loading times, which is always nice. And also more headroom for additional features down the line. I really like this slide, by the way. I'm going to let it sit for like a minute or two while I talk. The top row is Nintendo Switch. I don't have Nintendo Switch 2 here, and I kind of regret that. It would have been interesting. But this is like modern platforms, so it's last gen and current gen. You can see the third column there. It says 4 gigabyte or 3.2 gigabyte. That's usable memory on the Nintendo Switch. And that's for everything. It's shared memory. So it's RAM and VRAM. It's not a lot to work with. It's equivalent of an iPhone 7 Plus in memory. That's an old ass phone. CPU-wise, we are similar to an iPhone 6s. So why would you even attempt to port to Nintendo Switch? It sounds awful, right? Well, it's challenging, but the audience is there. Nintendo Switch sold 156 million units making it the second most selling console of all time, just shy of PlayStation 2. That's kind of insane. And then you think, well, let's skip Nintendo Switch. We're still big audience in Xbox and PlayStation. It's true, but even if you only go current gen and you go for the Xbox, you still only have 8 gigabytes of usable memory. It's nowhere near like your stations at home with 64 gigabytes of RAM. So you still have to probably do some optimization work to get stuff to run. I added some more stuff here on the whiteboard section. First off, to double back, grant us visibility, more audience reach, and it also might be right with your demographic for the game. If you want to make a game, it might be better suited for the console audience, and that you have to do your own research on. There's also the possibility for physical releases, which is nice. 25% of all games sold are still physical copies of games. And I think we're closing in on the why part. I think I sold it pretty well though, didn't I? I want to cover this a bit, and this is why porting seems difficult. This is something that before I started doing it myself, or starting working with ports, it was just like a fringe concept, something, it was like siloed knowledge in certain studios. And I think this is due to the fact that there is limited published knowledge sharing. This due to NDAs partially, but also what you can share, you should share. And you should incentivize other people to port as well. Also, I haven't seen any formal education which covers heavy optimization and porting and reworking rather than making new games. I think this is a big one as well. And the last one I want to mention is the complexity of the certification process itself. Today, Microsoft actually released their requirements for the public without NDA. So if you are curious, you can go in and just check their website. They call it XR documents or XRs. It's great if you are going to get a grasp of how it is and what you will face. I can strongly recommend that if you're curious about porting. And that's actually the end of why. And let's get into the fun part of the presentation. So this is part of the challenges I imagine people face, not just programmers, because porting is kind of programming heavy, but I imagine most people facing. So this is the do's and the don'ts. What you shouldn't do is start compiling from sort without checking your disk space. Then act surprised when your drive fills up, acting like a goblin hoarding PBD files, and you're forced to install your Peggle Deluxe copy. Don't do that. You should budget at least 200 gigabyte, like a responsible adult. Build on SSD and clean your intermediates. Next one. Don't copy-paste platform SDKs directly into your engine folder, hoping that everything is gonna go well, like you're assembling IKEA furniture without a manual. It's not gonna go well. What you should do is follow the platform-specific documentation, even if it's 50 pages long and it's written like it hates you. It works. Read it like it's the Bible. Testing and build automation. This one is dear to me, actually. I think this is a really important subject, and I think if you're a smaller studio, even solo dev or even studio, this is something you tend to forget. But this is something that keeps your games testable and make sure they're up to quality, and that's not just on your dev's PC, it works for the players as well, the same way. It helps to increase quality overall of the product. So let's dive into the first one. Don't wait until launch week to build your first console build and then go, why is the font 800% larger and the controller doesn't work? What you should do instead is start building for all platforms earlier. This might be obvious, but it's easy to neglect as well. Even if it fails, then you know it fails, and that's beautiful. That's data, that's something we can work with, and that's nice. Also, don't build manually and upload every patch like it's 2004 and you're running a Half-Life mod. What you should do instead is automate it. Start with basic scripts and then slowly graduate to build graph or something like that. Also, here you get bonus points for automatic Steam uploads and version tagging. Version tagging is really important to be able to track bugs and make sure it sticks in this version, to be able to sure it's actually sold, not just claimed to be sold. Next topic. Architecture and refactoring. This is a really small one. Let's go. Don't leave your code base look like a cursed Jenga tower. If you touch this part, the whole inventory system breaks, you touch something in the menu and the cars doesn't start in the game. That's just a mess. And that's really hard to port as well when you have high coupling in a project. What you should do is modularize, use interfaces, and of course keep coupling low. And document just enough to keep future you from rage quitting. That's documentation is nice. Alright. You shouldn't load up your product with 37 marketplace assets like you're modding Skyrim in 2012. They say they work, but it's not a promise. So be careful with what you add. Instead, you should audit every plugin. Test them in package builds. If it's not critical, just ditch it. Fewer moving parts equals less cert failures and generally just less pain and less rebuilds. Optimization and profiling. I wanted to have like a whole talk on this, but I think everyone will get very bored done with me. Don't assume your performance is fine because it runs well on the dev's PC when the game is passed. Like 120 FPS, we're fine, it's cool. That's not how it works. You should profile it. Use stat commands, size maps, the reference viewer, Unreal Insights. And if you don't recognize all of these are extremely valuable tools when building games in Unreal. Size maps helps you keep track of like how much memory is loaded. When you reference one thing, it will reference lots of other stuff. So that is a huge, very helpful tool for keeping down memory. Also, find your bottlenecks before the publisher does. Don't treat optimization like an afterthought. This is something that I feel like is all too common. We'll solve it later, We'll fix it in post. It's the famous last words before you blow up your Switch dev kit. Instead, design with constraints in mind. Do tight memory budgets and streaming zones. Think about shady complexity. Unreal gives you the tools. Make sure you use them and not just let them lay there on a dusty shelf doing nothing. They don't do any good there. Certification and planning. Don't submit your first build with dev sheet still enabled that crashes if you skip the introduction and think how bad could it be. Instead, treat cert like a real milestone. Plan ahead, read the XRDX documents. Again, I cannot recommend them enough. This has been a subject under strict NDA for so long. This is a big step in the right direction for making it available for everyone and making it get better. Get someone to play exactly how the testers would as well. You can't just play the critical path and hope that the game is solid, the game is stable. Make them play it wrong, like really wrong. Also, don't assume that cert is a checkbox you check on a Friday afternoon before beers. Instead, book time, track requirements, do tests per feature, budget time for rejections. This is a big one, because if you have a really tight schedule and you don't budget time for rejections and stuff like that, it can really break the schedule for you, and then you release late and no one is happy. It happens to the best of us. So budget time, and that is really important. And then actually get the last slide for you, and then we do questions. The finale. Don't release your game on PC only while you let the consoles weep in the corner. Instead, go all in. Launch everywhere if you can. Visibility multiplied, especially in a stable, tested and certified game. Short and sweet. I would love for some questions.
Yeah, you were talking a lot about like the technical aspects of porting.
Yeah.
But I'm also thinking a lot about interface porting. Like design-wise.
Yes.
If you go from the PC idea of a Steam game and then launch it on the Nintendo Switch, which has a much more expanded interface.
Yeah. So
how do you approach that?
So abstraction is the key to this. Build your game based on abstraction. When you add new platforms or stuff, it becomes much easier to work with from a programmer perspective, but generally how you build features. You build them that they're not dependent on other. I mentioned briefly modularity, so that's a good mindset. When you build with abstraction, you build for security for the future, for both porting and other stuff, and it will save you a lot of headache. Yes.
Quick follow-up. So
Yeah.
Does that mean that you're sharing as many forks as possible?
Yeah, because there will always be things in common. So, but you want to abstract away the actual logic which is specified to the platforms ideally. And that goes for like everything in programming generally. That's a good approach and a good way to go about it.
Thanks.
Do we have? Yes?
You said you were working on porting. How late in the process you usually start, or are you integrated with other teams?
This is a very good question. So I recommend starting the actual work for porting quite late in the process, because stuff like achievements and stuff won't be in place. But I would recommend start planning it for early. And when you start to build your game, if you build with abstraction in mind and take conscious decisions, knowing that this game will likely be ported, you can make porting really easy and cheap. If you have it as an afterthought, like now we're gonna start the porting and you just smush things together building the game, it's gonna be expensive, it can take a long ass time, and it will be just painful in general.
Do you try to plan so that the port itself is released close to the original release?
Ideally you want same shipping, that's generally what you aim for, but that means if you start with some overlap, like toward the end, the actual work, when the main features that's required for porting or the platforms is done, the PC version will still lay idle, or not idle, you can still do fixes, but there will be work like afterward. The porting likely won't be finished at the same time. That's my experience anyway. Yes?
Would it be, because porting costs money,
Yes.
would it be better to hire someone from the start and just release it to every console you want to, from the beginning?
As I said, you can't really start from the beginning, but during development, it's generally coming in later in the process. The mindset starts, the planning, the budgeting starts, and I think this is, if you take in right decisions, this is absolutely doable yourself. If you have a project that's a nightmare, I recommend paying someone else to do it. Because if you haven't had the experience, it becomes kind of expensive, even if you only put your own hours into it. As opposed to like a porting studio or like us, or there are many other studios as well. They are so much faster or much more cost efficient because they've done it so many times before. Also, it's easier with planning because they know the platform holders. They have worked with them before. They know the certification process. Discovering that for the first time can be quite painful. Yes?
So I haven't ported before, so this is very interesting. How does the actual project kind of infrastructure setup work? Do you have a separate project version that you're working for reporting, or how do you keep track of which console you're reporting towards? Like global variables, or using methods like detect which console, what is used, or how does that work?
This is gonna be different for all companies, of course. But I think just if you're using Git, different branches for the porting. But also one thing I mentioned, when you do porting stuff, the optimization you're doing, you want that for the PC build as well. So it needs to have to be it can't be fully isolated because you do work you want for the PC as well. So generally I recommend working a bit in isolation, but still merging into main and make sure you get everything there. Or similar with Perforce as well. Yes. Did I answer your question, by the way? Yeah. Yes?
Great talk.
Thank you.
And a lot of things that not enough people are bringing up, obviously, because not everyone can talk about this. What's the worst porting experience you endured, I should say? That you can talk about, obviously.
So I think I can give an example of the worst, and the problem is when you see that development has been stressful. Like most of the things are in messy blueprints, and blueprints are generally more expensive. They don't have to be, but it can be a lot of performance difference there. You showed your UI stuff, the video stuff like that can matter as well. When they haven't considered performance at all, and then they want a reason on Switch, and that's generally difficult. And you don't want to strip away the whole game either, because then it loses its charm. So then it will be like a discussion with the stakeholders or the client, so to say, and see how much can we strip away from this game. Are you still willing to go to Switch? It won't be much of the game left. So I think that's when it's a lot of work and it's not clear from the start, and you start discovering stuff. You dig into the project and you start looking at the UI, and it has so many layers of things, and everything, it ticks every frame. So it's just, you have to clean up the UI, and then you have to clean up blueprints and convert some to C++. Generally neglecting the project. A well-organized project is much cheaper to and much easier. So projects that don't care, those are the hardest. Yes. Yes?
Very practical question.
Yes?
How do I track the untracked memory in Unreal Engine project? Like, I have 10 gigabytes of untracked memory, I have no idea how to track it.
I don't have the best answer for you. I would love a good answer for that as well. Sorry.
Really inside to do that, and then just a low-level memory tracking mechanism. You can see.
It is an untracked section LLM.
Yeah, exactly. That's a big problem. I think if you have access to Epic Pro, you can ask some questions. There are some platforms. I think it is PlayStation or on Xbox where you have zero untracked memory, but that is a big problem. Yes.
Yeah, I would love an answer for that as well, to understand how you track that.
There's not much they can do because it is it's not reported by the driver, for example. Not much they can do.
Yeah.
It's a big problem.
And
So whenever you're working with projects, do you usually see like any trends or small features or details that you can quickly change and read some quick remarks from?
yes.
What are those?
Yeah, so the first big one is always changing compression formats for textures. I think that's the biggest win for like so many projects. Your platform specific compression formats, those give a lot. If they have issues with memory, might get you all the way, and you might not have to do that much optimization and can focus on the platform implementation instead. That's the first big win, but then it kind of differs project to project. But I think compression and textures is the biggest one. I've heard somewhere that is usually around 60%. I see it differs game to game, but I would believe that that's an average, but I have no clue.
So, how much of these, when you're talking about like the compression formats for textures and stuff, how much of that can you do in bulk? Like pressing a button and it just runs through it. So, doesn't references just get messed up?
No, it's actually kind of easy. Like there are multi-edit stuff, so you can actually change stuff really easily. I think for ACT, for that Switch uses and Android, for example, I think it is actually in project settings you can actually force it to compress like that, if I recall correctly.
For some platforms, you can select the compression format when you do the build.
Yeah, that's the same.
It'll
Yeah.
just take a bit longer to make the project because obviously you need to re-optimize for that version, but it's just a selection drop down in some platforms.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's not a per asset.
For some compression formats and for some platforms it is, but in the best case scenario you get exactly what TK described. Thank you for the clarification. Yes?
You talked about like the trade-offs of what you are willing to get rid of in a game, and is there something that you think that is like generally people hold on to too dearly but actually doesn't really matter in a ported game or stuff?
Oh,
I know that's a hard one.
I like the question though. So people are very, very nicky with graphics. They don't want to lose their graphics fidelity, and it doesn't matter. And they have the best game loop ever, the best game ever, but they don't want to compromise on graphics. So they'd rather have 20 FPS and really solid graphics rather than having lowering the graphics, making the gameplay really solid. That's I think the graphics, the graphical fidelity.
So just you should let it go and go for a higher frame rate and let go of some of the graphics.
I would recommend that. Yes, you can optimize. This is something I just didn't really touch upon. Optimization has diminishing returns. Like there are easy wins in the beginning. The further you get down the rabbit hole, the more work for less. You get less back from it. So if you have to go into like the really micro optimizations to get something out, it's gonna be a lot of work, and you get almost nothing from it. So sure, you can say I want to keep my fidelity and spend months and months getting fraction of the performance. Yeah.
Cool, thanks.
Yeah.
One of your big arguments at the start towards why people should consider porting more is how much money is going towards consoles, people buying console games. But of course, most of that money is going to be going to the more publicized AAA games.
Absolutely.
So the amount of money going towards the lesser known games on consoles, is that still comparable to that percentage rate? Like how much money is the lowest known PlayStation game getting, for example? So at what point does porting, which costs time and money, become not worth it?
That's a good question. I don't have the best answer. This is just general trends. You see lots of games dropping on Steam with no visibility, and then they drop on console and maybe on a sale or something and pick up pace. Also, that kind of fits back into the PC version as well most of the time, because when you get visibility, it kind of spreads. So it's really hard to answer like a good threshold for that. But I think try to get your audience. I think understand your demographic. I think that's the most important. And if your demographic is like a cuddly, cozy game, rather be played on a couch rather than in front of a PC, understand your target audience. I think is the answer for that. Some might be that it only works as a console game, and some only works as a PC game. I'd argue shooters, but I have suck shooting and controller.
When we're talking about XR documents and things like that, how much in certifications are actually spent on the quality of the experience versus the quality of the coding or whatever? Because there are some real shit games on the PlayStation Store, for instance, that are basically uncompletable with trophies that can't be accomplished and things like that. How much of that is actually a part of their certification, quality control?
So I love that I can talk about this now. So the thing is that it generally tests how your game as a system works within their system. It's their features, stuff like trophies and so on, are being tested. Also, like stuff like performance and stuff. Also, things stuff can be let through, which are not optimal, and hopefully those things get patched in the future. But they can't test everything, and that's the reality. They have like their checklist, but there will be bugs, and all the games are different, and they might not be able to get to an area or something like that. So everything can't, of course, be tested in reality.
Apple Vision Pro!
Nice shout out. Any more questions? Do we feel finished here? Thanks for having me.